Hi, Richard. How are you doing today?
Hey Moses, I'm good. Great to see you again, my friend.
Great to see you. Great to talk to you. You're somebody who I believe a lot of people should listen to, especially those who live in the Middle East, but also those who live in Europe but might be interested in that region. Without further ado, I would like you to introduce yourself. I'm sure you will introduce yourself much better than I would do. So please go ahead.
Beautiful, thank you. Richard Marsden, 57-year-old Scotsman who has a little bit of experience of living and working in international locations. So, really, really quick potted history. My background is technology. Um, I started in 1986 at IBM, traveled around on expenses around Europe, realized that this was actually quite a nice way to live and work. It's quite a nice way to make a living. And then over the sort of remaining sort of 20, 25 years more recently, moved into sales roles with some big technology companies, Check Free, SunGuard, Wolters Kluwer, Salesforce most recently, and really took international companies into those international markets, into Europe, Middle East, Africa, but spent a fair amount of time over in Asia and Australia as well. So, yeah, international nomads with a technical background.
It's very interesting. On your LinkedIn bio, it says that you spent 20 years in the Middle East. You
Yep.
developed this understanding of the region, I'm sure. And my question is, what initially brought you to that region, and how was your perspective on the region? How has it evolved over time, over these 20 years?
That's a great question, and I think the answer to it is actually in the question itself. As the Middle East has evolved, as Europe, Middle East, Africa as a territory for me has evolved, I've seen new opportunities, new markets opening up, and I suppose we'll get into this a little bit more as we go through it. But a lot of those markets are areas that people are very nervous of, very apprehensive, almost scared of, and I think a lot of that is a very false perception. Um, but I think it's put a lot of people off going there. Having said that, I've seen companies embrace going there very early in the journey. I mean, Dubai, everybody knows nowadays as this huge Instagram metropolis, very successful business location, but quite an interesting one for a number of dynamics. There are only about 1.2 million Emiratis in the country, and about 10, 11 million people in the country. And Dubai is a city state within 7 emirate states. It's a bigger country than many people realize. Um, so I think it's the evolution of the region has necessitated bringing new technologies, new solutions to market. So I wouldn't say that I was particularly pioneering in the sense that I wasn't leading the charge to go there and sell. In many cases, I was being brought in, I was being introduced, I was being asked to come and provide technology and services. So it's a little bit of both. There's a natural pioneering spirit in me. I'm Scottish by birth. And as you know, we kind of cast our nets very wide. We got to Australia, realized it was too warm, kept going to New Zealand. I think there's a natural desire to kind of go and expand and see the wider world. I came from a very small town of 10,000 people. The world is bigger than that. There's a much bigger world out there, and I think it's important that people experience it.
Yes, exactly. I think it's part of the human nature. You know, we are curious. We look at, I mean, look at Christopher Columbus. Why did he decide to jump on a boat and go explore other territories? And
Yeah.
same applies to many cultures. You talked about a few minutes ago. You spoke about stereotypes, about the perception that we have here in the West about the Middle East. Dubai, of course, Dubai probably has changed because we talk when we think about Dubai, we see Lamborghinis and parties, but I think the region has much more to give than that. Can you tell us what is right now? What is number one misconception about the Middle East from a British point of view, probably?
Brilliant question. I think the answer to that is much more complex than the question allows. Um, I would say probably, and it's really risky. It's political. I think a lot of this is down to the way that mainstream media presents it and the way that people understand it. And you know where I'm going to go with this. I think there's a lot of concern around human rights, women's rights, equality, all of those issues that are so important. They are important. I don't want to denigrate any of them or diminish any of them. I think they're all vitally important. But I think if you actually take the time to go and experience what the Middle East is about, those disappear very, very quickly. And I'll give you a couple of very practical, quick examples, hopefully. I was at an event recently in London, hosted by one of the big legal firms. And this was to talk about funding of real estate projects and development of the kingdom, particularly of Saudi Arabia. And a lot of the questions were, how many people think there's a great opportunity? Oh, yeah, we all do. The hands went up. How many people recognize that this is something their companies should be investing into and doing? Yeah, we all want to be part of it. Hands go up. How many of you have been? Well, no, we haven't been. And I think there's the only way that you overcome these issues, the only way that you really see the truth, not the propaganda that we get in the press, is to actually just buy an airline ticket and go. What's the worst that could happen? We alluded to the fact, or mentioned the fact, I started in 2004 in the Middle East. It's my first real experience. And I was asked to go to Saudi Arabia. This was only a few months after an incident that had taken place at the American compound. And it was a dangerous place to go. And my boss was very much of the opinion that, you're disposable. I'm quite willing to send you if anything goes wrong. It's on you, not me. A little bit like the king in Shred. It's a chance he was willing to take. It opened an opportunity for us in the kingdom with some of the most hospitable and, humorous people I've ever had the chance to work with and meet. There are a few other stories behind that I'll tell you another time. But arriving there and realizing the pace of change and the fact that they're not encumbered by legacy. They're coming at this with fresh eyes. They're coming at this from a perspective of, not that we've had mainframe systems in place for years and we're doing it this way. It's how do we start doing this in an entirely new way? And that's really refreshing. And it gives you almost literally a blank canvas to work from. And that's really exciting for a techie guy. How do we create something here that we probably couldn't do back home because there's legacy systems that we need to work with and there are barriers and resistance to change. This is, these are countries that are going through massive transformation of change. And that's really, really exciting. And it's palpable and you feel it when you go there. When you go to Dubai, when you go to Saudi, you talk to any of the Uber drivers, they're Saudi nationals. And they're all so proud of what MBS is doing and the direction the Crown Prince is taking the kingdom in. There's a pride that we just don't seem to have in Europe anymore. We certainly don't have it in the UK anymore.
Yeah, I was just about to say, try asking anybody, whether in France, where I am today, or in the UK, what do you think of your government? It wouldn't be like, you would just start on bad mouthing them.
And so when you consider that the #1 record in the UK at the moment is a parody of an old Christmas song that is basically taking the mickey out of our prime minister for, freezing pensioners to death. I think it starts to give you, a really interesting perspective on the world when you look at it in those terms.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with, the politics of the UK at the moment or not, they're coming in off the back of a 14-year run with the Conservatives that's left them with some challenges. You can't blame everything on a government that's only been in place 6 months. But all of that aside, I think there is this overwhelming sense of positivity in the Middle East. It's almost like the American dream, right? Come to America, you can do anything. The reality of that is you need to go to the Middle East to do that now. America is becoming very nationalistic. I don't think it is quite the American dream that it used to be. But you look at the United Arab Emirates, 80% of the population or more are expatriates in that country. They've opened their arms to people of different nationalities, religions, creeds, colors, races. How they even let 57-year-old Scotsmen in. There's just an ambition there and an openness to learning and changing that I think, Saudi's trying to play catch up to. It's a good 20 years behind Saudi. But the people who were in Dubai 20 years ago, ask them how they got on. They've done very well. The place to be now is Saudi Arabia,
Saudi Arabia.
with all of its challenges.
Of course. And so you were there in 2004. That's 20 years ago in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
How has it changed? How did it look like as opposed to Saudi today?
Beyond all recognition. Beyond all recognition. So the second story I was going to tell you was when I was there quite recently, I was taken for dinner, or I went to dinner with a female colleague. She's Jordanian, but grew up in Saudi. She drove herself to the restaurant, and actually on the way, she picked up 2 other colleagues. So 4 of us had dinner. Now just think about that statement in and of itself. So she's no longer chaperoned. She's able to drive herself. And without a chaperone and the ability to drive, she's picking up 2 male colleagues. None of that would have been possible 5, 6 years ago. It just wasn't permitted. It wasn't possible for her to do that. And she made the same observation to me when she arrived in the restaurant. She said, I drove myself here tonight and I picked the 2 guys up. You get it, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I do. That's transformational for you. And I think it's the same in business. I mean, when I was there 20 years ago, it was very suppressed. It was a very different place. You're walking up to sort of passport control, and there's almost a sort of sergeant major type character going, "Why are you here?"
Yeah.
I've got a meeting at the central bank. You're almost on the defensive. You turn up now, and there are ladies in passport control going, "Come on in, come and see Ronaldo, come to the Kingdom Tower, come and visit." It's a very, very different place, much more open. And it's ironic because the grandparents of some of the people that you're seeing now driving this change were used to a time of drinking and dancing and music. And then there was this period of suppression. So ironically, I think the grandchildren and the grandparents have an affinity that the parents in the middle don't have, because that was all kept under wraps. So I think it's chalk and cheese. It's a completely different place. But it's harnessing all the benefits of what it does have, oil money. It's not their fault. That's what their primary industry is. But they're using that now to transform the industries that they're creating, or the industries that they're buying into. They're investing into airports. They now own 15% of Heathrow. They're trying to bring in logistics. They're trying to look at how do we move away from the model of buying everything in, food products, automotive products. They buy in 100% of their cars. How do we start building those here? And they're doing that now with Lucid Technologies from San Francisco. So there is this recognition that we've got this big pot of cash. Can we do something with it to diversify away? And I think the numbers now indicate around 50% of the money is coming from non-oil and gas industries. And that's great. So a really long answer to the question, but it's a real chalk and cheese change.
That's great. That's great. And I think they're investing a lot of money in the knowledge economy. They understand and this part of it, right?
And again, if I go back to so to answer the question, if I go back to the session in London, I had to kind of jump in and explain to people, if you're looking at Dubai in isolation, it's sort of London on a really busy day. It's about 7, 8 million people, probably pre-pandemic. People aren't going back to the office. But it's that sort of size of city. Compare and contrast that to Saudi Arabia, which is probably about 60% of the size of the United Kingdom, with multiple cities, multiple areas. It's got mountainous areas in the north. It's got farmlands in the south. It's got the oil and gas business in the east, close to Bahrain, across the King Saud Causeway. And it's got Riyadh and Jeddah, which is obviously the home to, Mecca, Medina, the home to the 2 holy mosques. It's got a tourism industry that's based on religion. It's got business interest growing in Riyadh. It's got a similar location to Dubai in Jeddah on the coastline of the Red Sea. It's developing all the Red Sea coastline as part of a giga project. But they're fundamentally different. You've got 35 million people compared to 1.2 million Emiratis plus a chunk of change of expats. They're just different places. They're really different environments and economies.
Exactly. And a big percentage of of these 35 million people are young people, are youth. I would say six.
Something like 70%, 70, I think is the number I keep hearing is around the sort of figure, that are in their 20s and 30s. They're young enough to be my kids. That's the sort of generation that you're working with. And they've come out of this period of suppression, and they want things to change. They're hearing it from their leadership. The Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, is a god over there. I don't want to use that term insultingly, but I mean, he's leading the country from a visionary perspective. He's creating things that no normal human being should imagine. There's a lot of criticism of the line. It's gone from being 170 kilometers to being scaled back to whatever it is. That thing's going to be modular anyway. You can't just magically click your fingers and have 170 kilometers of futuristic living and working accommodation built. That takes time to do. Dubai didn't create Dubai overnight. That was a very small fishing port. It was known for pearl fishing. It was one of the world leading pearl fishing locations. It was about 10,000 people back in the 30s, 40s. Then they discovered oil in the 50s. In the 70s, they started doing some development of the city, but it was still a 2-lane desert highway with very little there beyond the establishment round the creek. It was only really in the sort of 90s and 2000s that you saw this massive explosion of development and 20-30% of the world's trains being based there. Saudi's going through something similar now. It's playing catch up to that. But Dubai wasn't created overnight. It's taken them 70 years to get from small fishing port to Instagram metropolis and everything that comes with it. It's not an overnight sensation. So Saudi's going to have to do the same. It's going to go through an evolution. It's going to go through change. But yeah, you've got 70% of 35 million people who want to drive that change. You need to go. People need to go and just experience for themselves the very palpable ambition and entrepreneurialism that just seeps out of everyone that you speak to.
Exactly. And then speaking of criticism, I think the best way to avoid criticism is to do nothing. Like if you're doing something and if you have a vision as big as ambitious, criticism is to be expected. So it's totally normal.
Okay, there are many adages that you could apply to business that, if you're not upsetting somebody, you're not working hard enough.
Exactly.
You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. You can apply any. And of course, there's going to be criticism. There was a Fox News interview with the Crown Prince not long ago, and he was asked about the term sports washing. He said, "Look, it's added 1% to my GDP. I don't care what you call it. I'm going to keep doing it. I want another 1.5%. So, the criticism of Live Golf, you bring in some competition to established industries. Of course, they're going to be upset. And yeah, the fact that they've got money to throw around, Ronaldo on 300 million plus, and John Rahm being paid, half $500 million to represent Live Golf. Yeah, of course that upsets people. But, change always does. It doesn't matter if it's within an organization and you're bringing in a new IT system. It's in our nature to resist change as humans. So you do it on a scale that he's talking about, creating new cities and floating digitized logistics hubs in Oxagon. People are going to look at you and go, "You're mad. You're certifiably mad." And then they build it and they go, "Well, actually, okay, that's kind of cool." So yeah, if you're not upsetting somebody, you're not doing business right.
Do you think part of it is jealousy? Probably, like what happened during the World Cup in Qatar. I've seen it on mainstream media here in the West. Yeah, everybody was talking about human rights, but LGBT uh, rights and all these things, and he just forgot to talk about the fact that it was super safe. There were no fights, super organized. It went on smoothly. So
And I think you can look at, I agree with you. I think you can look at that from the other perspective of it's about respect. As a woman, if I'm coming through passport control or through security and I need to be frisked, I don't want to be frisked by a man. If I come through a women's only queue and, there's segregation, if that's how you want to describe it, I think it's about respect. And, we can't impose Western values on a Muslim culture. You have to respect that, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I'm not going to bring my Western values with me and impose those. It's actually one of the things I dislike about Dubai is the Irish villages where people go and drink. I mean, integrate into society if you're going to go there and live and learn something and find ways of integrating with different people. I think if you create, almost compounds as they've done in Saudi, and I understand why they've done it, but if you create those, you keep people isolated. I'm all for integration and for giving people the opportunity to learn from each other. You look at Dubai; it's got Muslims, Christians, Jews living next to each other, quite happily. I think it's where we see these false narratives coming through or political agendas coming through that it creates that sort of conflict. So yeah, I think there's definitely scope for for change. There's scope for improvement. And I think there's a lot that we can all collectively do to take responsibility for that.
So funny you're talking about ghettos, but we were having the same debates here in Europe about like actually non-ethnically European people. But then we forget that many Europeans and American Westerners actually, when they move there, they tend to live together.
Yep.
Maybe it's part of human nature. I don't know.
But you see it, Chinatown, you see Little Italy, you see all these different districts, if you like. It's natural that people gravitate towards each other, but equally, I think you learn more by integrating and experiencing different cultures and religions and perspectives. It's okay for us to disagree. I won't necessarily agree with absolutely everything that you say and do. But the point is not to then get aggressive about it and start imposing our Western values on that country. It's to try and find a way of living harmoniously where we can be respectful, we can all do the things we want. And I think the drinking thing always comes up in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Saudi is dry.
Sure.
I completely get that. But so is Sharjah, which is the emirate right next to Dubai. So, it's not a one size fits all. And alcohol has been blamed for a lot of football rioting and the problems there, which obviously, as a Brit, I can probably quote you many examples of of shameful episodes that we've had as a result. And I think Qatar took a very brave decision. It was brave in a number of respects, and I think it resulted in one of the best tweets I've ever seen in my life. Was the announcement that they weren't going to serve alcohol, and Budweiser's reaction was, "Well, this is awkward," which I just thought was a tremendous one-line quote. Um, but it didn't lose anything for it. I think you saw the other side of football coming through. There were lots of people tweeting about, "We've been welcomed into Qatari homes." We went to this guy's house and the door was open. He just said, "Come in." You wouldn't do that in the UK. My door is locked. I live just outside London. My door is locked 24 hours a day. I let you in. And they were inviting people openly into their homes. I think that was very, very different. And it was about respect, and it was about not wanting to have those issues that sadly we've seen so much of in the past.
But why do you think mainstream media in the West is still holding on to these old cliches about the Middle East? Do you think is it political or is it ignorance?
I think it's all of those and more. It's undoubtedly political. I think there are agendas being driven. You just have to follow who own many of these mainstream media channels, and you can understand the bias. It suits the political agenda of different countries as well as different individuals. Anyone who's read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, will understand that there are bigger games at play here. And unfortunately, the way that you control people and countries is through debt. You do destabilize a country, make them dependent on weapons or restructuring infrastructure, supply companies. Then they need the money from somewhere. It's the same thing that we do to our children. Go to university. If you don't, you're not going to get on the career ladder. They're saddled with £30,000 worth of debt before they even start working. So I think there's a combination of things. There's a much bigger political agenda. I think it suits the purpose of the United States to a degree. As a country with 4% of the world's population, but 50% of the defense spending, if your business is war and weaponry,
It's in your interest.
you create those situations. Yeah. So, and we're seeing that being enacted at the moment. It's
Crazy.
very, very crazy and very unfortunate and very sad what's happening, but it's politically driven
Yeah.
and commercially driven.
Commercially as well, exactly. Because speaking of business and money, commerce, let's zoom in. Let's zoom on Saudi Arabia. Why does Saudi Arabia matter on a regional and then on an international level, in your opinion?
It's clearly taking much more prominence in the political world. We're seeing the emergence of BRICS now, and BRICS being seen as something serious. Where a few years ago, it was inconsequential. It was just a few outlying countries making a bit of noise. And I think what Saudi Arabia has done is it's tried to normalize relations prior to last year with Israel. It's tried to take away some of those conflict situations that were being created. It's trying to find a way to be a player on a truly international stage. It has money. It's invested significantly overseas. They invested massively in US tech stocks to bolster some of those companies. So, and again, there's a degree of interest from from the United States in nurturing that money. But they're taking a much more prominent role on the world stage now. You're seeing Mohammed bin Salman meeting world leaders. His relationship with China is burgeoning. He's got Alibaba Cloud coming in to deliver SaaS services in the kingdom. And the Americans are going, hang on a minute, we're missing the opportunity because we were against them. We've been fighting a certain narrative. We need to get in there quick. So you've suddenly seen AWS announcing that, we are now going to do this. So I think we're seeing a reshaping of the world. I mean, if you listen to some of the narrative from China, they're not about conflict. They talk a lot about it, but the rhetoric that's really coming negatively is coming from the West. China's a threat. China's taking over our intellectual property. They're no respecters of IP. They're the world's factory. They're building things cheaper than we can do it. Well, that's just market dynamics. They can afford to do that. We've been giving them our business for years. Turnover most things probably says made in China somewhere.
Even the iPhone.
We've given them the business.
Exactly.
So, we can't be surprised when they suddenly become big, successful, and, we've given a lot of the EV technology to them. They're arguably the world's largest EV manufacturing country, period. Teslas are built there. Tesla obviously opened up the IP issue by saying, well, here's how we do it. They took it away. They didn't patent it. They gave the technology out there, which encouraged everybody else to do the same. So you have BYD, you have Geely, they're taking over in the EV space. That's market dynamics. That's how it works. We can't be surprised. We can be upset, but we can't be surprised.
Exactly. So what are the main sectors that could be of interest to European companies? We're already obviously tech sector in Saudi Arabia. Are there any other sectors? And is it too late to enter the Saudi market?
No, not at all. Again, great question. So if you think about where Saudi Arabia is, and again, for anybody who's been, they'll recognize this, and for those who haven't, I'll try and impart a little bit of knowledge. But the road infrastructure is designed for a populace that was much smaller a few years ago. The Alaya Road that goes up through the middle of Riyadh is a couple of lanes each way, 3 lanes in places. If you think about the Sheikh Zayed Road in the middle of Dubai, it's like 6, 7 lanes in places, and it's solid and it's jammed every day of every week. We have the same issue in the UK. We built the N25 orbital ring road with 3 lanes each way. You could have doubled that, tripled it, and it would still be at capacity. So the infrastructural side of things is massive right now. It's not my industry. I'm a tech guy. But you just know that with all the cranes going up and all the development that's taking place, all the infrastructure that needs to be built to support all the conferences, all the businesses they're trying to attract, all the new office blocks, all the telecommunications companies that need to work with STC and some of the other incumbents to provide the infrastructural services that supports this growth, they're all there. All these data centers need power. We're hearing a lot of discussion around these modular Rolls-Royce nuclear facilities. Again, as unpalatable as they may be because they're nuclear, they are the answer. Wind and solar and other renewable technologies are just not going to cut it at the scale that they need. Solar should be able to. They're in the middle of a desert, they get sunshine. But again, that's got to be done at a certain scale. So there are tremendous opportunities and a lot of discussion that is taking place around the growth of that infrastructure and the supporting services that go with it. So everything from roads, which a lot of the Chinese companies are helping to do, building construction, but yeah, infrastructural support organizations. I would be rushing there right now. I would be on the first flight I could get to get over there and sit with MISA, the Ministry of Investment, and work out, where do I go when I come here? How do I open a business? And again, this is the same way that was discussed in Dubai 30 years ago. Do I have a sponsor? Does the sponsor take 51% of my company? That seems a bit rich. I'm not sure I want that. Well, they're going to give you the introductions as well. They're there to be your local mentor.
Bigger cake, actually.
Yeah, I'd rather have 49% something good, which is 100% of something small, right? That's exactly the analogy. So I think, understanding how to go into the kingdom and how to work there is pivotal. And MISA has representatives in many of the embassies and consulates around the world. Go and talk to them. They'll tell you, they'll explain it to you. You can come in as 100% owned, or you can come in with a business partner. It's 25% to a local. Or you can come in and work in partnership with an organization. But come. That's the key thing. Just
provider from the outside.
Yeah, just come and experience it. Come and learn about the different options available and work out what's best for you. But if you don't go and you don't experience it and you don't talk to people, you're never going to understand it. If you just sit in your own little bubble of, this is my perception, therefore it's real, good luck. There are other companies that are going to take your business.
Do you think many companies like this?
Sitting in their own little bubble?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there are too many companies that are afraid of the impact it could have on their business, particularly big American companies that have a strong established user base, where that perception is almost pandemic through the organization or through the country. Would we lose more clients than we would gain? Is the commercial balance there? Do we gain more by doing it, or do we lose more by doing it?
Why? Because of the image?
Perception. Yeah.
Perception of Saudi Arabia?
I mean, if you talk about human rights and, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, try being gay in Alabama. Good luck with that. There's a television show here in the UK called Top Gear. They did a prank a few years ago writing "man love" on the side of Richard Hammond's car, and he got chased out of town. There are certain parts of this rhetoric and this narrative that I think are only ever going to be overcome by people going there and saying, "Dan, I was wrong." But getting those kind of people out of North America to get them into the kingdom in the first place, that's your first challenge. So other companies that are nervous, yes. Other companies sitting in this isolated bubble, absolutely. Other companies that are much more open to it, who are reaping the rewards, yes. And are they selling their soul to the devil? No, not really. They're making educated and informed guesses. They're taking the time to learn, and they're making a rational decision based on what they think is right for them, ethically, culturally, morally, commercially, whatever the decision making is. So it's down to any individual company. But yeah, there are typically three types of people in the world: those who will buy your product, those who will never buy your product, and those in the middle who need to be convinced. And it's not a third. The group in the middle who need to be convinced is by far the much bigger group.
Exactly. Convinced and informed as well. And I think the best way to contribute to a more open Saudi Arabia is to build bridges with Saudi Arabia. So if you think that you would like them to learn about more human rights or international best practices, then it's actually then you should go there and maybe open up an office on the ground. That would be the best way for you to talk about your culture as well.
like all the guys in the, in the fund managers that I met in the London office. Oh yeah, we all want to be part of that business. We all want to have a part of it. We all see the opportunity. But no, we haven't been. No, we haven't been. Uh, Come on, the world is big. The world is interesting. People are fascinating. Just go and experience it. Go and look at what they're doing in NEOM. It's bigger and better than you can imagine. It's not the emperor's new clothes. Yeah, I mean, the line is going to take some time. But go and look at what John Pagano and his team have done at Red Sea Global in sympathy with the ecology of the marine life. They're not ripping it apart. They're creating a legacy there for generations to enjoy. They're creating these environments, marine environments, that are good for the coral, they're good for the the marine life. But they're also stunning locations. You can do both. And they're doing it sympathetically. But they're doing that by bringing in the best marine biology and science experience that they can find. They are reliant on expatriates who've done this before to lead the way, to show them the way. They're bringing people from Dubai, they're bringing people from all over. Learn, but then over time introduce Saudization, as they do,
Yep.
to bring those people up to speed, to make sure that that continues, that legacy continues after the expats have gone.
So that's very interesting. In terms of these sectors, we've already talked about infrastructure. You said that there's many opportunities for foreign businesses to go there to contribute. I can imagine there's mainly SMEs, not only the big companies, but also smaller, medium-sized companies, enterprises might be as well, might have um, projects to work on, smaller projects, supporting projects.
Yeah.
What are the other vital sectors that might need help from abroad, outside of the kingdom, in your opinion?
Almost any industry that you can imagine. So imagine healthcare. As populations grow through bringing expats in, they bring in different challenges. They bring in need for more hospitals. Just in and of itself, you need more medical personnel to fill those. You need more people to provide the ancillary services. The dental practices, the hairdressers, the dry cleaners. All the things that we use every day. These are the sort of SME businesses that can pop up. Not everyone is going to be an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates. You need the big companies. You need those to attract the personnel who want to go and work there. So you see a lot of the big consultancy firms, a lot of the big technology firms, Google and AWS and others, taking teams of people over who have the expertise on their products. But you nurture and you bring up the local population at the same time. But you need all those ancillary services. You need the coffee shops. You need the sandwich shops. You need the pizza places for people to go to and enjoy. So there's everything. As you create these big, like King Abdullah financial districts is almost like the Canary Wharf of Riyadh. As you create that, you create the need for restaurants, for hairdressers, for dry cleaners, as I say, all the ancillary services that support everything that we do. That's how people live. These micro environments are created by the big companies coming in the first place. So everything, there's opportunity for everything. Aviation, they've just created Riyadh Air to try and rival Emirates as a hub in the region. You need ground personnel, you need air crew, you need absolutely everything that you can imagine existing in an airport, duty free, all the tax regulations, all the regulatory aspects of things, all the legal side of things. You need all of these roles in all of these industries. So it all grows as each of those grow.
So, and I don't think they have enough locals to cover all these needs.
Not at the moment. And it's that really, so we go back to what we were discussing previously, that enthusiasm, that entrepreneurialism that exists. The E that's missing is the experience. And that's what they buy by bringing in the fourth E, which is expatriates. So you bring all of that together, you bring the experience, you bring 57-year-old gray-haired Scotsmen into the country who know how to do something, and you align them to the people that have the enthusiasm. We learn in three ways: visual, audible, and kinesthetic. You can show somebody what to do, you can tell somebody what to do, but they learn best by doing it. The kinesthetic piece is how they learn. They learn by osmosis in the office. They're hearing you describing a situation that you've fixed a problem by doing something a particular way. They learn by hearing it in an office. So you need people working with people to find that right mix. And yeah, you need the expatriates with experience to match the young enthusiastic entrepreneurs. That's how you build a society into, in a successful metropolis like Dubai. It needed that expatriate resource to do that.
And you tell us more about your Injaz Alarab, your what was Injaz Alarab, or your
So,
contribution and work on in this organization. What is Injaz Alarab?
so Injaz is a charity that works with school children. It's part of a bigger global program called Junior Achievement. Um, and I'm part of that as a brand ambassador in the region. And what I try to do is bring companies in to provide the business volunteers and to some degree some money, donations to support the work that they do. And what they do is, as part of the program, is they teach them about financial management, which schools don't teach us. They don't teach us how to invest, how to save, how to balance the books at home. Um, they don't teach us how businesses work. We know that they exist because that's what our mums and dads do, right? We're aware that our parents go to work and they do jobs. And I suppose many kids actually know what their parents really do. Maybe if they're a doctor or something obvious. Well, my dad works in an office as what? An accountant, a salesman, what? So what Injaz does and what I do with Young Enterprise here in the UK, so it's the same program, just different names in different countries, is we go into schools and we teach children the basics of running a company by allowing them to run a company. So over the course of a school year, they start a business, they come up with a product or a service, they sell it, they make some money, they compete against other schools in the region. There are local competitions to whittle the numbers down. If they get far enough in the competition, they compete against other schools and other teams in Europe. And if they go far enough, internationally, which is exactly what business is about. You take a regional product, it's something that has value in another country. You open an office, you expand, you're going to come across competition. This just teaches them the reality of running a business by enabling them to do that themselves. They literally start a company under the Mems and Arts, the Memorandum and Articles of Association of the charity. They run their own company for a year, and then they go into this competition globally. And it's brilliant. It's a great way to give them exposure to business volunteers who do different jobs to the ones that they may be aware of. It helps old people like me to keep current and talk to young kids about, we do social media this way, and they're like, oh, no, that was last year's platform. You need to talk to this. You need to be using this platform. So it's a symbiotic relationship. We teach them, they keep us informed of what's happening in the real world as they see it, IRL. But it's just a great way of bringing and nurturing that education at a global level. The Junior Achievement do a great job. It's Injaz in the Middle East. It's Young Enterprise here in the UK.
So it's like it's a regional initiative. It's not only in Dubai, but you work in other countries.
It's probably a global initiative, if you know that term. So global in the sense of Junior Achievement is this overarching global program, but then there are regional variants. So yeah, Injaz covers the Middle East and North Africa. Young Enterprise covers the UK, and yeah, it's Junior Achievement in the US and probably other things in other locations. It's a great way to empower children by having them do at a much earlier age, even before they go to university and specialize or do their PhDs or whatever. It's a great opportunity for them to learn that I need to work with other kids that I might not necessarily associate with. The kid who really understands mathematics and can do the spreadsheets might be the CFO. I'm stereotyping, but just working with other children that they might not naturally gravitate towards in the school or the playground. They learn that they have to rub along with other people, which is life. That's what we all have to do.
How do you partner with how do you partner with this? Do you partner with schools or with I don't know. How does it work? Do you go to schools and you tell them we would like to teach your kids what you don't get or what you don't get taught? How do you
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much. So the charity has some prominent people working for it. I'm just a business volunteer. I sit on the local volunteer team here in Essex in the east of England. But it's the business, well, it's the business volunteers or the people within the charity who promote the service to the schools. The schools make the children aware of it, ask them if they'd like to participate. There is a cost. Um, the charity bears some of that cost, particularly for state schools as opposed to private schools. And we try and encourage as many people to come through the program as possible. So whether that's one-day programs teaching them about finance, or longer term projects like company program, which is over the year. The charity really kind of enforces that with the schools. They make them aware, and if they want to, they participate.
know?
There's no pressure. We don't force them, but we've had millions of children over the years go through the program. And the chairman of our local volunteer team here in Essex is an old alumni. He went to work in the city. He's worked for Bank of New York Mellon, now HSBC. And he's a very active supporter of bringing people from both of those organizations into the charity as volunteers to impart their knowledge, because it's different for everyone. My experience is going to be different to yours in business. And we give something different and unique to the kids as we go through.
That's really amazing, and you're making a real impact on the societies where you are. Where you live.
I'd like to think so. And I went to a very small state school in Scotland. I didn't have the opportunity to do something like this. I didn't know about business when I started. I think it just gives you that little edge over your peers. And if you think about recruiters and people in companies looking at these kids coming through, they've only really got academic qualifications in many cases on their CVs when they start. If they go to university, they might have a few internships. But if they're just coming straight out of school, what have they done differently? What makes them stand out to me as a recruiter? If all I'm looking at is, 3 A's, a B and a C, compared to, 2 A's, 2 B's and 2 C's, how do I draw a distinction? I need to know who the real person is. What people buy from people. I want to know you. What have you done that's different? Well, I did this thing for junior achievement or for young enterprise or in jazz. We started a company and we made these unique cookies with everybody's name on the top of them, and we made XYZ profit. I worked with some great colleagues, and we had a great time doing it. We came third in the region. Okay, now you're different to 2 A's, 2 B's, 2 C's. So it just gives you that little edge. It's the advantage perhaps of getting the job or even not getting the job.
Mhm.
And
I think a great initiative, and I really believe that the educational system is really outdated and has so many glitches. So if you want to build, or if you want to have future ready young people, you need to have them learn about finances, things that are really useful for the future, right?
it's imperative. These are the next generation of business people coming into your organization.
Yeah.
Why would you not invest in them that step earlier and give them the advantage of understanding a little bit about what they're coming into? That's it's almost sort of paying it forward, right? I want to get those kids up to a level of comprehension so that when they first start working here, I don't have to take them through the absolute basics. They understand the concept of what they're coming into. They know they need to come in 9 to 5 or 8 till 4 or whatever. They understand the role that they're going into is customer facing. I can identify the ones that are quite comfortable with that, or the shy retiring ones maybe need a little nurturing, or they're just not ready for it. We can identify those kind of characteristics earlier in the process. Why would you not make that investment? They're the next generation of your business.
Yeah, it's this is the blood and oxygen.
And I agree with you. I think the education system is fundamentally flawed. It has to be by necessity. It's comprehensive education for a reason. You want to give people a broad exposure to a broad range of subjects and see what works. But we're all individuals, and that's incredibly difficult to do. It's incredibly difficult to teach people that way as well. And you don't want to create homeschooling in isolation, because then we lose the social. So I understand the challenge of it. I don't have the answer to it, but I absolutely agree with you. I think education is flawed the way we do it. There's definitely scope for improvement, and there's a lot of basic things we don't teach people. I used to do home economics when I was at secondary school. I was taught how to cook. A lot of people, including my son, had no idea how to use a washing machine. And he's 27. It's just those life skills we don't teach. We lose that. We lose the relevance. We don't teach social media. Children encounter social media from the time that they get their first device. Yeah. And they need to learn how to deal with that. They need to understand the implications of saying something or doing something that footprint is there forever. I have the advantage that mobile phones weren't around when I was younger, so there's no evidence of some of the stuff I've done. Children today have all of that as a digital footprint to go with them. And that's really difficult. It's difficult being a child now.
It is. You're overwhelmed by too much information, and you're probably not equipped with the necessary skills to understand how to filter this information.
Yeah. And then, again, I go back to my childhood. It was good to be bored. It was good not to have something just to, like Caligula, entertain me, yes or no. Is this entertaining? Swipe right, swipe right. We had to go make stuff up. We had to make our own entertainment. We were creative. We thought critically and laterally about how to do things. We avoided getting into too much trouble, or we just worked out that we could run faster than the local bobby if we did something we shouldn't have done. But, I think that bred a certain type of stoicism and inquisitiveness and creativity in us that just doesn't exist today. If the answer is not on page 1 of the Google search results, we give up. That's too easy. We've got to think a bit more Apollo space mission. These are the bits they've got. Put all the parts on the table. Make a life support system out of all these parts. We don't do that anymore. If the answer's not on YouTube or on Google, forget it. I'm not doing that. Got better things to do. I'm watching my YouTube shorts.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Maybe that type of soft skills are needed. It could be even like a business ideas, teaching soft skills and sales, for example. You as a salesperson, something that's very important that you're not taught at school. So maybe it's could be of interest to Saudi today. But speaking of the past, what would be your advice to Saudi leadership and Saudi youth? I remember we discussed this last meeting, and you said that Saudi needs to be careful not to try to imitate, or we shouldn't lose their identity. I'd like you to give us your opinion on this.
Yeah, and I think this goes back somewhat to some of the work we've done with students through INJAZ. That I spoke to a couple of students a few years ago in the Emirates who'd kind of lost the sense of identity of what it meant to be Emirati, because they were surrounded by people who were Western, huge Russian populations, British, Western expats, who were the dominant expatriate nation in their country. That's weird. We don't have that in the UK. It's certainly not the States, and the situation in the States. It's easy to lose that sense of individuality and identity. So I think it's really important, to your question, I think it's really important that Saudi recognizes, and I think it does, that it needs to maintain that more. And I think it's easier to do when you have a larger national population anyway. 30-ish million people is not 1.2. The 1.2 in the Emirates, Saudi Arabia has that number of people working in its government infrastructure, just to put it in context.
Yeah.
So again, it's a much bigger nation state. And I think it's going to find it slightly easier to maintain that sense of identity. Equally, that sense of identity is potentially holding it back in some areas, which is controversial. But allowing drink events is kind of normal. When you watch all the boxing competitions, people like to have a drink before they go and watch the fight. They have a drink afterwards. They're not necessarily going to cause trouble. It happens, but that's why you have a police force. But I think identifying that perhaps, and this may be something for consideration, maybe Turkey al-Sheikh and the General Entertainment Authority that he runs could get dispensation to create entertainment zones, so there's drinking is possible. Maybe it is for expatriates. I don't know how they're going to work this out. but to create those environments where people can go and enjoy those events the way they want to. Or maybe there is a leaf that they take out the Qatari book and they just say, no, it's not possible. You can still enjoy yourself without alcohol. Who knows? But I think ultimately it comes to take your time. Dubai did not become Dubai overnight, as we said before. It took 70 years. That's not an overnight sensation.
Yeah.
It takes time. Don't be in too much of a rush. I know you've got this Vision 2030 goal. We've got just under, well, nearly 5 years now to achieve that. You've got 2034 World Cup coming. There's so much that needs to be done. There just isn't the resources, and there just isn't the time to do it all the way you want to do it.
Like
It's
what? What needs to be done from now to
the line. The line is the perfect example. It's the easiest one to reference. You are not going to create a 170-kilometer long living and working space in the next 5 years. It's just not possible to do it with the greatest of will in the world. Even if you had every engineer, every builder, every architect, every cement and steel factory in the world focused on doing it, well, maybe then you could, I don't know. There are certain things that just take time, and that's okay, because they evolve and they change and they become better for it. You just have to lean into it and accept that some things just take a little bit longer than you planned. For the 2034 World Cup, that can't be the case. They've got to build the stadium. But things like NEOM, can that wait a little bit longer? Can that be modular? Can that be done over 3 decades rather than 3 years? Yes, of course it can. So it's acceptable and it's okay to not quite hit the targets. Some of them need to be prioritize those. The key here is to bring people with you on the journey, though.
But what do you think they are in such a hurry when it comes to NEOM? I mean, when did the race start? The race with, let's say, with Dubai, with like Emirates, the regional race. Was it?
I guess you could say officially it was probably 6, 7 years ago when Vision 2030, well, in fact, it was longer than that. When Vision 2030 was announced, it was this desire, having addressed some of the issues in the kingdom, and recognized that, we want to go on this journey as well. We want to enjoy some of the trappings and success that Dubai has had. We want those in Saudi as well. It probably began then, but you had to get rid of some of the issues. You had to take away some of the barriers. You had to allow women to become a fundamental part of the workforce. You had to allow that perspective to be listened to be able to be heard. I was very fortunate. I worked with some great at the central bank 20 years ago. Half the workforce were women back then. Now, they were in a segregated part of the office, but their perspective was unique to the proposition we were delivering, which was a payment system into the kingdom. If they're balancing the books while the husband's out doing whatever he does at work, their perspective has value. Their opinion mattered. And it took some very brave people back then to make that decision. That's now the norm in Saudi. You have women leading businesses, and rightly so. So I think.
So how did it come about? Like, did the MBS wake up one morning and decide to give women more rights, or do you think it's part of? Was it pressure from outside?
I'm not privy to the mind of MBS. I'd love to be. Would I? That's probably an interesting place to be. I'd probably like to be in there for a moment in time just to get a snapshot. Yeah, I think it's got to be a combination of things. I mean, Saudi Arabia sends a lot of people internationally to be educated.
Yep.
So they get to see different cultures and different ways of living and working. That has to rub off. There are good things about the West. There are good things about the Far East, about Asia, and the different cultures and different places that people live and get educated in. There's a lot to bring back from that, as we alluded to at the beginning of this conversation. So I think recognizing that this is probably an evolutionary thing, that this has been many, many, many years in the making. This is not unusual for people to be sort of cast out worldwide to learn in different places and learn different skills. They bring back some of the culture of those places as well. There are several people that I work closely with in Saudi Arabia who are much better British accents than I do because they went to the right schools. So I think it's a combination. I think, yeah, certainly MBS was probably underestimated in terms of his worldly wisdom. He was many books written about him. He was the son at his father's feet playing computer games, but he was listening and learning how to run a kingdom. Whereas his brothers who were sent overseas were having a great time in the States, partying and, learning. Again, that's all well documented. I think there's probably a combination of things that came together, but also a desire to see the reputation of Saudi be cleaned up. He took brave and bold steps to do that. So I think there's probably no one simple answer to that question. I think it's a combination of things. It's a combination of sort of nature and nurture and bringing that evolution together with just the experience that he gained in the position that he was in.
And it
So
seems to time as well, as you said, this is a combination of many things. It's an evolution as well. He's a young man in a young country, and this probably played a role.
I'm seeing it from his cousins overseas. I mean, Qatar has gone through a dramatic change.
Yeah.
Doha, beautiful city. Again, very Dubai-esque, very Western in its appearance. Dubai has been the flagship for the region for many years. My wife started working there 33 years ago, before I started in the region 20 years ago. And it was a fundamentally different place. It was just getting used to expats coming to watch rugby sevens, to come and experience sporting events. So they've had the advantage of watching Dubai in that sort of 30-year period evolve and change and make mistakes and learn from them and make changes. And they have the advantage of being able to talk to trusted advisors in, their wider community to understand that, we did this, and if we were going to do it again, we'd do it slightly differently. So there are people on the doorstep. There are cousins on the doorstep. They can ask those questions of. It doesn't need to come from us suggesting this is how we think you should do it in your country. They're doing it from a perspective of other Muslim countries being sympathetic to the needs of Saudi Arabia as it goes through this change.
Yeah, and I have a feeling they're talking a lot, and they're getting a lot of advice at their cousins next door, as you said.
Yeah. You see it all the time. I mean, there are lots of visits from, the UAE royal family and the Qataris. There's lots of social interaction there. There's a brotherhood of cousins and people that they can speak to and get good advice.
And
It's
these
not
are related tribes and family, and apparently, like they're in Peninsula. It's
right. So I mean, there is a regional understanding of what needs to be done and what shouldn't be done.
Exactly.
So I think they get very good advice from sources close to home.
Yeah, lessons learned. Where do you see Saudi Arabia in 10 years from now, by the time the World Cup starts? Like economic, maybe politically as well, if you dare to talk about it.
Yeah, I think if I dare to talk about it, I think if I go back to the observation before, I don't think I have the vision to know where it's going to be in 10 years' time. I think it'll be in a I'm going to answer that by giving you an example. So there's a very dear friend of mine took a job in Saudi Arabia a few years ago, and he was asked to put together a plan and budgets, and he put these together, and there were lots of zeros on the budget. And the first observation that was made to him was, "You're not thinking big enough. You're still thinking in millions. You need to be thinking billions." And I think it's a great example of we just don't run those kind of projects. We don't have that kind of money and that sort of nationalistic infrastructure change at our disposal in the West. We run projects on behalf of companies, not countries.
Yeah.
And you see this when you talk to people like my friend, I'll spare his blushes, that we think of things just on a completely different level. So I think if you're looking at it from MBS's perspective, if you're looking at it from the ruling family's perspective, they have a much grander vision. And this is part of the challenge we have with democracy. Every 4 or 5 years, the governments flip, or the policies flip, or the ministers flip. and we blame it on the previous outgoing government. And there's no continuity. There's no real vision and clarity and strategic vision of where things are going to go. Whereas MBS does. You know, it's not alien to him to think about building a 170-kilometer long city. I don't think any of us would have dreamt of that. I wouldn't dream of building Rotterdam as a completely autonomous floating logistics hub on the Red Sea. Would you?
No.
So how can I envisage what it's going to be like in 10 years' time? Let me try and answer the question though. Will they meet all their objectives? No. Will they meet most of their objectives? I would like to think so. And I think there will be enough encouragement given to people to make sure that they do. I think they'll have to work more closely with other countries and other companies to bring the experience and the resources in to achieve that. But I think they're open to doing it. Will it be perfect? No, but I don't think anywhere ever is. You know, there are parts of Dubai that are not perfect, and it's well established and, you know, well maintained, but it's still evolving and changing. When I first went there, you know, the compounds for the workers were sort of one road back, a couple of kilometers back from the main Sheikh Zayed road. But that was the sort of outskirts of Dubai. You start building areas like Falcon City, Arabian Ranches, Motor City, Talal Al Gaf, Jumeirah Golf Estates. These are all further out than where the local workers were stationed. And you think, hang on a minute, why they're living closer to the center of the city than I am?
Yeah.
Admittedly, not in the same comfort. But I think it's an evolution, and it's not perfect, and things need to change and adapt, and that will be the same for Saudi. Will it get everything right? No. Will it get a lot right? Yes. Is there other things that we can't foresee happening? Possibly. Nobody saw COVID coming. A couple of people might have done it, was lab grown. But, you know, there are things that impact us that perhaps we don't have control over, put it that way, or that we can't envisage. So, yeah, I think it'll be a fundamentally different place. I think it'll still have that desire for change, more growth, a bigger place at the world table. Will it still be a fascinating and interesting place to go? Come with me in 10 years. Let's go and have a coffee there and let's see what it is.
When I say beer, how important is the West for Saudi, in your opinion, having an alliance with the West in terms of economy, maybe militarily speaking, politically speaking?
As things stand at the moment, very. You see a lot of Western companies being attracted into the region, not just into the kingdom, but into the region, because they bring knowledge, they bring a big brand name, the likes of, you know, X and Google and Microsoft. You know, they all bring technology that we all use every day. So, of course, you want to have a local presence for those companies because there may be changes that we need. You know, right to left interface for Arabic language is pretty fundamental. And a lot of Western companies haven't developed their applications that way. Some have, not all. So is it important to adapt to those regional changes and to have people based locally? Of course it is. You know, Arabic language is a key issue. I speak very little Arabic. Not an issue for me in Dubai, but it is an issue in Saudi because the majority of the population still speak Arabic. So I think you have to adapt, and that means either bringing people in who can speak it, or ideally you have the people who have the language capability and the cultural capability inherently. And that helps because, again, people buy from people. So I think it's important that it has those relationships. I think it's interesting at the moment, the cultural variances. And I think unfortunately, the incidents over the last year have heightened these for everyone. And I need to be very careful how we word this. But I think it's very important that the politics of the West and the politics of the Middle East come closer together, and that we find more harmonious ways of resolving conflict than escalating conflict. You know, we have something.
With Trump in power, these things might change? Because it feels like him and his administration, it's not interesting having a war going on in the Middle East. They're looking to have more stability. More,
Yeah, he made a fascinating observation about Syria that this is not our war. We shouldn't be involved in it. The United States gets drawn into world wars in locations that it shouldn't. The whole episode in Afghanistan, the regime change, the
Iraq.
Iraq, Afghanistan, the whole weapons of mass destruction, fabrication. There were many people inside their own administration saying they don't have them. This is not true. But there was a political agenda there.
And it gets
The way
as well. You have all these manufacturers, the weapons, and the companies that were behind this, obviously.
Yeah, and I think to your observation about Trump, I mean, Trump is unpredictable, to say the least, but predictable in other ways. He doesn't want to be involved in things that aren't commercially right for him. He's a businessman. He'll look at it with a business lens, which is in some ways is good. There's been a lot of talk on social media channels recently about bringing Musk together, and the decades of experience and the billions that they've made. This is the way you should be running a government. Yes and no. I think governments need to be aware of the impact of running a business and how to run a business. But I don't think it's necessarily good that business people are taking the place of politicians. You need policies. You need politics to play out the way that it does. But you also need business expertise. I think you need to find that balance is the point. Will Trump make things better? Yeah, if you take the example of the meeting with the guy from the Taliban, who, forgive me, his name escapes me, when they were discussing the situation, he took a photograph out of his pocket and slipped it into the Taliban leader's pocket. I know where you live. It helps to be feared.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yep.
I don't know that it's necessarily good to be a bully in other cases, or to be the backers of aggression in other cases. And I think that's probably enough on that topic. But I do think it's important that they find a way of working together. I mean, if we look at the situation we had here in the UK with the Troubles back in the 70s and 80s, that was resolved by ultimately sitting around the table and agreeing that enough is enough. We need to stop. It wasn't done by leveling Belfast. It wasn't done by inflicting massive civilian casualties. That would have just kept an eye for an eye. And as Gandhi said, that just makes us all blind. It's imperative that we find a way of, as we said right at the beginning, we might not agree on everything, but we don't necessarily have to get into a fight over the differences that we have. We should be able to agree to disagree on things.
And I think the region is probably tired of all the wars. And I mean, a country like Saudi and even the Gulf is probably not interested in having a war going on forever, because it's bad for business, bad for tourism. It's a nightmare. It's a headache.
It is. And you have to question how much control do they have over the process of stopping it. Somebody has to at some point say, stop, enough. And who is big enough and bold enough to do that? You then get into, how do we get your attention? How do we stop America from doing this? Do we look at the reserves that we hold because you've paid for all this oil in dollars? Do we destabilize your economy to get your attention? That's, again, way beyond my pay grade. But these are the kind of discussions that are taking place, right? There's a bigger world order being discussed at places like Davos and even behind the scenes where it's not as public as Davos. And, those kind of conversations need to happen. Somebody needs to be brave enough to come forward and say, we need to broker peace. We need to stop this from being the norm. We need to change this narrative. And that's going to involve some incredibly difficult conversations. Incredibly difficult on everyone's part. And I don't want to diminish how important that is. But let me try and liken that to commerce. A deal between two parties has to be mutually uncomfortable for both. It can't be a win-win. It has to be an acceptable amount of lose-lose. I need to give something away, discount. You need to give something away, references, or whatever the thing is. There has to be a mutual degree of discomfort on both sides before we're both happy with the deal?
As
Did I get it at full price? No. Did I give them 10%? Yes. Can I afford to? Yes. Do I still make good commission? Yes. Are you happy with the product? Yes. So, I mean, ultimately, I think and this is hopefully where, where Trump can bring something of that business world to play, is there has to be that acceptance of not every deal is worth going for, but if we do, there has to be mutual discomfort on both sides for it to be right. If one party wins and the other party loses, they're not going to be happy. You go out high-fiving and celebrating and, we screwed them. We got the better deal. You've got an imbalance. It has to be mutual dissatisfaction that causes you to be happy with the deal, ironically.
super interesting. Wow. Was there any other question or any other thing that we forgot to talk about today when it comes to Saudi presence, future, or any like something that you would advise that we give to Saudi or Westerners going who have already decided to maybe go explore Saudi on a personal or business levels?
Probably lots. Again, I go back to the observation we've made a few times in this. Go. Whatever your perception of the country, go. Go and experience it for yourself. Find a conference, find a trade event, find a reason to go, find a meeting to attend, but go and experience it and take a few days either side of those meetings. Accept the fact that you need to, because they may not necessarily turn up. It's a cultural thing. They may be late. It may be, couldn't make it today. It's Thursday. Can you do next Tuesday? You need to be flexible. You need to understand the region. And that's not disrespectful. It's just a difference in culture. But ultimately, go and experience it for yourself. Go and learn about the culture. Go and learn about the things that you didn't think it might have. Go and talk to someone. Pick up the phone to the embassy and ask them, I'm a golfer. Are there golf courses in Saudi? Can I go and play them? The answer to that is yes, by the way. They've got some amazing golf courses. Tag on a couple of days. Go and experience something that you enjoy doing in a new location. Put yourself slightly outside of your comfort zone. Don't just go for the conference Monday to Thursday, jump on the first flight out, or take the first flight to Dubai and have a boozy weekend in Dubai. Take the time to get to understand Saudi, its culture and its people, and just talk to them. They're some of the most hospitable, generous, kind-hearted people. And they love having people in their country. They're so proud of their country. They want to tell you about it. Pick an event. Go for Saudi National Flag Day. Go for one of the national days. Go for an event that means something to you or means something to them, and just immerse yourself in it. Experience it. Try the food. Go to Talia Street in Riyadh. There are no shortage of amazing restaurants. Try the kabsa. I'm here until Thursday. Try all the different things that you wouldn't ordinarily try. I've done it throughout my career. I've had some disgusting meals, and I won't tell you where, but try the local dishes. They might not be to your taste. I will never eat abalone again in my life, but try some of the local dishes and just experience the culture, experience the differences that exist. You might just like it. Don't be afraid to go. If there's an abiding message, put your perceptions to one side and just go and experience it for yourself. And if you still don't like it, then you were right. I was wrong. But if you go and you find something there that you did like and you find more commonality than difference, what's the worst of that?
I think you should be sponsored by Visit Saudi. Red, Red Ambassador in Saudi.
Hey, listen, if they can afford to pay John Rahm and Cristiano Ronaldo 300 million, they can get me for a bit cheaper, but I'd love to.
Exactly.
I'll proudly have the logo on my t-shirt. No, and I'm not overly realist. I'm not overly unrealistic about the situation there. Not everything is perfect, but not everything is perfect anywhere. There are parts of London that I don't like going to. There are parts of Glasgow that I don't like going to, and I was born up there. But I think you just have to accept that the world is big, the world is diverse. There's going to be good, there's going to be bad. Be cautious, be careful. But ultimately, just go and try it. Go and experience the difference and the commonality that exists in the world. Most people are good. Most people are good. They're kind, they're caring, they're considerate. If you're lost and you ask directions, somebody will tell you. If you really need help, you'll find it. The world is not that different. At the end of the day, we're all just here to try and live a good life, be good to others, be good to our family, be nice to dogs, not overly keen on cats. We wouldn't harm one, but we just need to rub along together. And I think for me, it would just be, go experience it, see what it's like, see how it's similar, see how it's different. And as I say, if you come back with just a grain of, wow, that was interesting, I wish I'd done that sooner, then you'll do it again.
And maybe you should spread the news as well. You should talk to your neighbors or anyone who might have bad stereotypes about the region. Just share with them. The word of mouth is important, I think.
Yeah, I'd say that to anyone. Don't be afraid to embrace a conversation with someone you don't know.
No.
The people on the whole, people are fascinating. Everyone has a story. Everyone has an agenda, but everyone has a story. Some of them are interesting. Some of them are less so. But you just never know who you're going to meet. And if you consider it from a business perspective, that person that you speak to might just help you to get your business off the ground or accelerate a deal. They might be the person that you've been trying to get to. You might just bump into them at a soccer game. You never know when you're going to meet the right person. You never know when you're going to meet your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever. This is the world we live in. Just embrace it, go out there and enjoy and experience it. Don't just sit on the other end of one of these things and think that's my interface into the world. It isn't. It really isn't. Doing things like this, talking to people, meeting fascinating people like you, this is how we experience the world.
Exactly. Speaking of which, are you going there soon? Are you going down to Saudi anytime soon?
I'm back in the UK for Christmas with my family, but yep, back there in January. Can't wait to go back. I need some sunshine. I'm so pale. It's 4:30 here and it's pitch dark outside in the UK. I need to go back and get some sunshine.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was on Zoom today with a friend from Saudi and was sitting in the sun. I was so jealous. That's such a beautiful place. Well, Richard, thank you so much. Where do people find you? If somebody wants to reach out to you to talk about whatever, golf, business, UK, Saudi, where can they fit?
You can get me through LinkedIn. My profile's on there. You'll see it in English and Arabic. Richard Marsden. The company is Harith International. We are really here as sort of market entry consultants, but also company representation as a business as well. So if you want to dip your toe in the water, but you're not ready to do it yourself, we can be that representative organization for you. If you just want generic advice on the region, DM me on LinkedIn. More than happy to respond, as you know. Very happy to engage with people. And again, my email address is on the website, harithintl, international.com. So if people want to find me one of those ways, always happy to have a call.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Richard.
Moses, a pleasure. Good to catch up with you again.
Thank you.
Look forward to the coffee in Riyadh.
Exactly. Very soon. Inshallah.
Done deal.
Bye.